Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at some more examples of Americans saying some crazy stuff about New Zealand. And again, I don't want to give off the impression that all Americans are dumb and stupid, don't know anything about New Zealand. I love my American friends out there. There's just so many Americans online, and a lot of them just don't have any idea about New Zealand. And some of the ideas they do have are just downright weird. Anyway, let's take a look at some of them. Had a guy yell at me about how it was unconstitutional for Jacinda to ban guns because it was against the Second Amendment. I don't know, man. The crazy thing about the Constitution of the United States is that it only applies to the United States, of which New Zealand is not. Yeah, funny that. The laws of your country only apply to your country. A bit like when Americans ask New Zealanders here or any other country, like, do we have the 4th of July? Well, yes, we have the 4th of July. It comes after the 3rd of July. But no, it's not a celebration. It doesn't mean anything in New Zealand. It's got no relevance here. Here's a good one from stalwart New Zealand politician Winston Peters back when he was Deputy Prime Minister under Jacinda Ardern's government days. Brutal line from New Zealand's Deputy PM. We've got someone who obviously got an education in America. So it looks like Winston Peters was giving a press conference and he shut down some sort of COVID denier, I guess, who was trying to ask him some questions. But there's an interesting comment here from an American commenter who says, sure, but until New Zealand's educational system produces the capability to deliver nuclear-tipped ICBMs, I'm afraid I can't ascribe it or New Zealand much importance. And presumably a New Zealander replies with, because we should all aspire to be like North Korea. I'm quite worried about this commenter for many reasons. I don't know why you'd consider the only metric of a country's importance is whether or not they can produce nuclear-tipped ICBMs. Yeah. Some crackpot countries out there have nuclear weapons. I visited America last year. When someone found out I was a Kiwi, the first thing they said was, oh wow, what month is it over there? I just looked at them in shock, not knowing what to say. And there's a good reply to that, Churvember. Remember that one? I saw an American lady videoing the 3D movie at Te Papa. Te Papa is the National Museum here in New Zealand. It's in Wellington. And I guess they've got a 3D movie in one of the exhibits. I don't know, I haven't been there for a while. That's not so bad, but she was holding a set of 3D glasses in front of the camera lens as she did it so she could capture the full 3D effect to show the folks back home. Yes, that's how 3D works. With sharp wits like that, I'm amazed she actually found New Zealand on a map in order to get here in the first place. Time for some rugby chat. There's one thing New Zealanders love, it's some rugby talk. Here's an American Redditor's view on rugby though. Everyone dissing the NFL, but don't realise if America has their own national rugby team, we'd wipe the floors. Next up, we have someone who left a YouTube comment about things. The Beatles actually sold their music to America because they got arrested for singing their songs to Europeans. This is insanity. Of course the Beatles moved to America. Hell, the Beatles never went back to England where they were born because there was a warrant out for their arrest. The chances of foreigners being kidnapped and killed or sold into slavery or sex slavery include most of South America, France, Romania, Turkey, Hungary, Ukraine, China, nearly 100% of Africa, New Zealand, okay, and a few others. Another big reason why Americans don't leave America is, why would we? For refusing to sell European Kinder eggs, which if Europeans had a brain, would have looked at Americans and said, wow, this is stupid and dangerous, but... cool story. Was at a hairdresser in New York State. Hairdresser cheerfully told me all about her sister who went on a volunteer mission to help the local villagers build houses in New Zealand. She got very embarrassed when I responded that, while we could certainly do with more houses given the current shortage, I suspected she may have been thinking of Papua New Guinea. Same trip, mentioned to a shop clerk that I was from New Zealand. He asked me how things were back home, with the war and everything. Asked for clarification and it turned out he thought New Zealand was a neighbour of Ukraine. There's a lot to unpack in this one. That hairdresser talking about her sister going to New Zealand to build more houses. Quite right, we do need more houses in New Zealand. Just look at the prices of real estate in this country. But yeah, I think her sister may have had her wires crossed about where she actually went. And the apparent war in Ukraine, which devastates New Zealand also. Not sure what to say about that, but when we look at this next example, it may give us a bit of a better understanding about Americans' knowledge of geography. A survey on where Americans think Ukraine is located. Jesus Christ. One, it's exceptionally worrying the number of Americans surveyed actually think Ukraine is somewhere in the United States. Even more concerning is that it's in the middle of the Southern Ocean, according to this dot here, and one dot that shows it's in the upper North Island of New Zealand. So, yeah. What can I say? Keep sending us that military aid, USA. What if the United States soft annexed Australia/Canada/New Zealand by unilaterally granting everyone in them American citizenship? Like, no talks, no treaties, just, you're all American now, welcome. What are they gonna do? Say no? We've talked about this before on this channel. If you haven't seen the video where American commentator Peter Boghossian is in New Zealand and he's asking New Zealanders on the street, would they agree to become the 51st state of the United States? It's pretty interesting. It's just a thought experiment. There's no chance in hell that's ever going to happen. But the arrogance of some people, I know I'm well aware that a lot of Americans like to think that they are the greatest country in the world, the greatest country that's ever existed, and they think that every other country's people wants to be an American. And the idea that people in other countries just don't seems to confuse them. Amanda Palmer tweeted once, "Just walked into a coffee shop here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and everybody behind the counter, not really knowing me but knowing I was American, erupted in spontaneous applause." Yeah, because that really happened. Who is Amanda Palmer? Let's have a look. Amanda Palmer, American singer and songwriter. Don't recognize her. Never heard of her before. What acts is she associated with? The Dresden Dolls. I've heard that name. I've only heard the name. I couldn't tell you any of their songs. Yeah, nice one, Amanda. I think judging by your massive delusions of grandeur, you need to check yourself into a psych ward. From a subreddit called Damn That's Interesting. One American commenter wrote, "Name a country that flew before the US. US aviation history equals the bulk of aviation history." I'm not sure where you were taught that though. While this one doesn't particularly reference New Zealand, I did read further down in the comments to this post that someone actually talks about New Zealand and the first powered flight that many people argue actually happened in South Canterbury in New Zealand. If you've never heard of this before, check out the video on this channel where I mention it. An American once asked me where South Africa is. Come on now, the answer's in the question. Americans' geography will never cease to disappoint me. Well, actually it does disappoint me, but in terms of producing us with great content, they just keep giving. Next up, we have a post on Reddit from what appears to be a real American, just judging from his profile picture. The thread is titled, "Let's see how far your communist country, brackets New Zealand, can run off all the money you stole. Haha, nice, let's withdraw troops from your country and see how you can balance the GDP without our military support. Let's see how far your communist country can run off all the money you stole and how much inflation fucks your ass with that super high minimum wage. Also, let's see how much y'all can innovate and create new inventions with a system that normalizes mediocrity to such a degree. Good luck." Trump 2020. What is the American military presence in New Zealand? I believe it's Fred from Montana. He's on holiday here in Christchurch at the moment. So Fred, get the f*** out. Sorry, Fred. Or how about this one? New Zealand is a tiny island with like 100 people living on it that people only know exist because of Lord of the Rings. Well, there's some truth about that. There are a lot of people around the world whose knowledge of New Zealand solely comes from the Lord of the Rings movies. The USA is the most important and most diverse country in the entire world. Shutting off travel actually has consequences when 90% of your population isn't goat farmers. Wrong domesticated animals, sheep farmers, get it right. And there's actually like a bit more than 100 people living here and even more than one island. Which brings us to perhaps one of the best / craziest examples of Americans who seem to know nothing about New Zealand despite being a travel writer. Susie Strutner, who writes for the Huffington Post, wrote an entire article about traveling to New Zealand, although upon reading the article, it's not really clear whether or not she actually came to New Zealand. But she titled it, "New Zealand's Other Island is a dazzling slice of paradise. The Other Island. Who knew? New Zealand has another island?" She writes, "If you travel mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, then you may have always imagined New Zealand as one singular island. Not sure about that. People who actually paid attention in class probably realized that New Zealand, and looked at a map once, that's if they can find a map with us on it, quickly saw that New Zealand has two main islands. Yet savvy travelers know the country actually consists of two main islands, the North and the South. Well done, Susie. New Zealand's North Island is a hub for Māori culture, a hotspot for scuba divers, and home to the cosmopolitan cities of Auckland and Wellington. But as it turns out, New Zealand's sensationally beautiful and significantly less popular South Island is a sprawling, rugged paradise many tourists have shockingly failed to appreciate. Are you mental? While most international flights into New Zealand arrive into Auckland on the North Island, it's very, very common for many, if not most tourists who arrive into New Zealand to quickly hop on a flight to the South Island where they spend most of their time traveling. Just look at any travel guide about New Zealand, any sort of travel brochure or video or TV show about people who've traveled here. Most of the scenery they show you and talk about, it's always in the South Island. It is a massive tourist hotspot. I wonder if Susie Strutner still has a job travel writing after this. If we scroll down, she's actually written a correction later on saying a previous version of this post included a quote about East Cape, a place we stated was on the South Island. In fact, East Cape is located on North Island. Language has also been amended to avoid the implication that New Zealand and Australia are not separate countries. Oh god. Not only did she only just apparently find out that New Zealand has 2 main islands, she did that whole thing again of thinking that Australia and New Zealand are just one country. Good job, Susie Strutner and HuffPost. What about this news item about a powerful moment New Zealand firefighters honor 9/11 first responders with a stirring haka on the 18th anniversary of the terrorist attack that claimed 2,977 lives? To which an American commenter writes, "Class act from our Aussie friends." Is that just bait? Is he trolling? Nowhere in the entire headline or the sub-headline does it ever say Australia anywhere. It says New Zealand twice, talks about the event being held in Auckland, also mentions how firefighters perform the Maori tradition. What is it with a lot of people around the world? Even if you never say Australia and you actually say New Zealand several times, they will still reply to you with some sort of reference to Australia. I've got a cousin in the UK who does that. He knows I'm from New Zealand. He loves rugby. I love rugby. We often talk about rugby when we do meet each other. On many occasions, we've talked about rugby matches between the All Blacks and various UK teams. And yet he will still proceed to ask me minutes later, "Oh, so do they have XYZ in Australia?" I don't know what to say anymore. Well, if you don't know what to say anymore, why not keep watching the channel? If you haven't seen it already, check out this video of more examples of Americans saying some crazy stuff about New Zealand.